The volunteers are very dedicated to these kids, but it was just a completely 180 from the tour that we had at the Twin Towers, because there a lot of the COs just didn't really acknowledge the presence of the inmates, and here it's like everybody knows each other by name and they're hugging and giving each other high fives. So I think that's really great that they have that support system, because these kids need it. They need to have someone supporting them.
So we got to sit down with 2 other volunteers in just a circle reflection with a lot of the girls there, and it was just extraordinary to hear their stories and what they've been through and how much faith they have and how they were so supportive of each other and how open they were with us. I think just blew me away. It was such an incredible experience.
I was also in her group, and I was just so deeply moved by just a sense of hope that they had, that they still had it in their power to turn their life around, and how deeply they based that on their faith in God, and that the girls really were supporting each other in their journeys, and that they knew that their journey wasn't done, that there were still going to be trials, they were still going up and down, they were still struggling with drugs and family members, but just that there was this deep sense of hope. And that the biggest thing I took away from that is that we are in juvenile hall right now, and that the sense of hope was so much greater just because they are young, but just when you turn 18, that hope shouldn't end.
One thing that really stood out to me was actually in the Mass, one of the girls sang Hallelujah, and it was so beautiful, but it was also so sad, because it was just such a strange contrast, because even though juvenile hall, it was night and day compared to Twin Towers, which we visited yesterday, but it's still a detention facility and these kids are still locked up, and it the Hallelujah was so beautiful, but it was also just so sad to have that beauty in such a hard place at the same time. So I don't know how these kids find balance, and I really hope that they do and are able to, when they leave, take the beauty and the good things that they've taken from their experiences here and at the programs and the supportive volunteers, and somehow leave behind the terrible fact that they were locked up.
When you can't make this place ugly, so you have to call it cool. That's true. They're usually at different levels.
So one thing for me is that it was hard to see how much it seemed like prison had actually helped him, and how much all the different programs had helped him to turn his life around and have marketable job skills and have a future outside. But it also made me realize that a lot of those things you could have without being in prison. So I just wish that people could get the kind of intense programming that he was able to have, and AA and NA and all these other programs that helped him see life differently without having to be locked up.
If I could ask one question, and I was like, well, I do a lot of work with kids, so could you guys say like one thing you wish someone had told you as a kid or done for you? And the man next to me, he's like, I'm 43 years old and I've never thought about that. And he just like started laughing, and he's like, well, I guess like he just talked about, all of them talked about like a lack of affection or lack of role models, and then they were just saying like, you like take this to like the kids you work with, and they were just like so like encouraging to me, and I was like, I don't even know, like it's so hard to put it into words, but I just wanted to stay with them. I wanted to eat lunch with them. They were like, I would never think I would be in that position.
It's just amazing how many mountains you can see. Death Row is like so romantic. My friend said I love you, and I was literally giving her away at her wedding, and she was like, over here to talk to you. So
He was so sweet, but when I sat down, he was like asking obviously what questions I had, and I had asked a few, and then he goes, so none of the girls had asked this before, and I'm just wondering, don't you want to know what we did to get in here? And I was like, no, I'm not that interested, like, if you want me to ask you that question. And he was like, no, it just seems like that's what everyone wants to know, like, what could have we possibly done to get in here, you know? Isn't that what everyone thinks? Isn't that what everyone cares about? Is like the actions that we took in our lives to get behind here? And I was like, no, I just care about how similar we are, and I want to find those similarities, like, now. And he was like shocked by that, and it was another one of those moments where they were shocked to hear that there was more similarities than there were differences between us. But I think for some reason that point just highlighted a much broader theme in all of our visits, which is this literal physical barrier between us and them. They are human beings. They're not of another species, right? They're just like we are, and yet the ideas that are held that we are so far removed from them, that we have never committed a criminal action in our life. You know, that, no, seriously, like, in fact, I was telling Miguel when we were sitting down with him, I always bring this up, this one sentence I said, because I've said it over and over again. I'm like, we have all engaged in criminal actions, whether or not we want to think we have, or we don't want to think we have. It's about accountability, and it's about who is held accountable in this society. It's about nothing more than that.
Can someone read this out for me, please?
22 number of California prisons built since the 1980s versus just one university.
22 prisons, one university, since the 1980s. See this chart here? It's important. From the bottom, your left, your bottom left, that year is 1962. The bottom right, 2012. 50-year period, 5 decades, right? It is important to understand that the crime rate has not changed over the last 5 decades. It remained the same, right? You were told some lies. The difference is there are nearly 6 times more people incarcerated today than there were 5 decades ago. And if you see the chart here, you notice there's a spike. Can someone see what decade that spike occurred? In the 80s. What was going on in America in the 1980s?
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan.
Administration.
Right. But what else though? I mentioned it earlier. There was drugs. War on drugs. Thank you very much. You see the spike? This is a result of the war on drugs. But once again, we were lied to. We're going to find out that this wasn't a war on drugs. It's a war on people. And as you see these figurines representing the different demographics that's posted here, there's one that immediately jumps out to me. Is there one that immediately just jumps out to you? Which one is that one? Black men. This is the lifetime likelihood of imprisonment for black males. That other chart we've seen about the 22 prisons, look at the focus here. 2 years ago, $60,000 to incarcerate somebody per person per year. But we only spend $8,000 to educate our K to 12 grade students, right? Here's another graph. This is a 7-to-1 ratio. Now, someone told me that our budget is a moral document, right? How you spend your money will be in accordance to your values. So clearly we see how our key decision makers, with their morals, or lack of morals, I would like to say, in this regard. The number here, 40%. 40% of criminal activity can be reduced with drug treatment. Again, the disease of addiction can lead folks to break the social contract. So by putting them in jails, it's not going to help the problem. But if we put them in community programs that are nurturing, that are conducive to healing, then we're in a better position of making sure that our community can remain safe.
The question isn't what are we going to do about these problems, but rather what did people need and when did they need it? Right? If I reframe things, and people aren't problems, people are people, right? What did people need and when did they need it? Right? When was an intervention possible? When could an intervention still be made? What needs to happen so that people's needs get met? Right? And not just the needs of the powerful, but the needs of everybody at the table. We went out into the community and said, you know, what is it that you need that's going to help you feel safe? And what people wanted was an opportunity to access healthcare without calling 911, because they never knew who was going to come if they called 911, right? And so one of the things that we did was we had these cohorts of mental health providers that came in and got trained for things like de-escalation, got trained for things, for being able to provide healthcare services or being able to call someone else. So instead of calling, and training the community to do that, so that when people are tempted to call 911 because they don't know what to do, maybe they'll call a social worker. Maybe they call somebody else who's more equipped to handle the services than someone with a gun.